Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and joining me today is Dr. Michelle Maidenberg. Dr. Maidenberg is a psychotherapist, author, TEDx speaker, adjunct professor at NYU, a blogger for Psychology Today, and someone who has a deep passion for mindfulness and personal development. Beyond her private practice, she's the co-founder and clinical director of Thru My Eyes, a nonprofit that offers free, clinically guided legacy videotaping to chronically ill individuals, and she also publishes weekly guided meditations on YouTube. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I so appreciate it.
Surprised you had time with all that stuff. Gosh. Busy lady.
You know how it works. You make the time. So
you make the time.
That's right.
You have to make the time. I'd love to kick this off with digging into your TEDx talk or the topic of your TEDx talk, circumventing emotional avoidance. So give us the 101, the baseline understanding of what emotional avoidance is and what it might look like in everyday life.
Thank you for asking. So what I really talk about, and it seems very simplistic, but people don't really get this. We find very masterful ways to avoid, deny, distract from our negative emotions. And why do we do that? It's because of the discomfort. Our brain neurologically and physiologically is wired to avoid danger and discomfort. We have a very, very reptilian brain. And a lot of the coping mechanisms and adaptations that we take upon ourselves is from childhood, and they are constantly putting us in a position of trying to avoid and deny our negative emotions for good reason. Like when people talk about being worried or frustrated or angry or whatever, there's a lot of shame and guilt and negative feelings that come along with those negative emotions because of the way they make us feel. Now, when I say the way they make us feel, I'm talking about our thoughts, because it could be very self-deprecating thoughts. It could be feelings, which are the actual kind of emotions that we're feeling, which then typically affects our somatic body, right? So like if you know that if you have anxiety that comes up or worry, you may have heart palpitations, you may have kind of gastroenterological stomach, pains or discomfort, nausea, etc. Some people get headaches, it manifests itself in all different kinds of ways. So when you realize how our bodies are wired, that it's actually a physiological thing. And when I explain this to people, they look at me and I could see relief. Like, oh, it's not just me. And oh, like this is typical and normal. And oh, like there's something I could actually do about this. Yeah. And so it's very enlightening to people because we live in our own minds.
Yeah.
We typically don't share that all this is going on for us. And when you're able to hear it and normalize it, it just, again, feels so much more empowering. And also the other piece of it, which is so integral, is the power is not outside of us. It's within us. We try to find all these mechanisms, whether through others or through different things, to try to heal ourselves. And that's not where the power lies. So when you could recognize, like, I could do things for myself that can empower me, that's empowering too.
100%. I think a couple of things. I think that we weren't raised, our generation-ish wasn't raised talking about these things, knowing what they are, feelings. I mean, you mentioned the stomach, and I will tell you there's certain circumstances where I get a little bit anxious, and I honestly didn't realize the pattern of feeling something in my stomach until a few years ago. It wasn't like I was going to throw up or it wasn't that noticeable. But after talking about it and hearing it and really understanding, I started to really recognize that pattern. But I think we didn't grow up in an age where those things were talked about. So we didn't even know to kind of connect those things.
Exactly. And also I always talk about this too, but where we get our skills modeled to us is through our parents or our caretakers.
Mm,
Now, I don't know about you, but I didn't exactly have my parents, there's a lot of intergenerational trauma in my family. And my parents just were not savvy. They didn't know how to emotionally attune. They never learned.
same.
And they had parents who were so traumatized.
Yeah.
So they didn't learn it from them, that's for sure, right? So how are we even learning this?
Yeah.
I see the difference how I am with my children. And I don't let my kids get away with not talking about the hard stuff. And then, for example, I met with somebody yesterday who grew up in a family where he had a sister who was extremely, extremely, let's say, fragile and had a lot of acting out behavior. And, how the parents spoke and treated and interacted with his sister, what message was communicated to him? What do you think? Like, if you're like that, this is what's going to happen to you. So, what did he do? Right? Very intelligently, as a little boy, he decided, I'm going to be the perfect little boy.
Mm,
And I am going to always do the right thing so I don't have to get the residual effect of those consequences like my sister does. And my parents are going to approve of me and they're going to show affection to me because they're accepting of me, not like my sister. So his whole entire life, he was literally like, he did not go out of the lines. He was the most educated, most hardworking, and it carried over into his family life. So what do you think happened?
he passes it on, right?
Yeah, he has this kind of destructive, I'm going to say, relationship with his wife, right? Because they both have their core wounds. So he's kind of placating her, she's placating him. He's never getting his needs met, he's never expressing his needs. And then with his kids, it's all about like literally kind of doing somersaults so that they'll approve of him and love him. And guess what's happening? It's all backfiring
Yeah.
because nobody is attuning to him. Nobody is actually like considerate of his needs, and everyone is disrespecting him. That's what happened.
Well, and I think most of us, listen, there's varying degrees, of course, but I think we all get to this stage in adulthood where we recognize that we've sort of been programmed with some of this messaging. Even if his parents, in your example, didn't say something directly to him, he picked up on it, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean our parents did the wrong thing or said the wrong thing. We might internalize something and take a message out of it, and that's what shapes us. So I guess if we just put aside for now, like how we got into this situation, most of us have some of this baggage. We all talk about baggage, right? And
Yeah.
so I guess the thing that we can help people with most is how to recognize when they're in a pattern like that. Like, how do you identify, other than in your example, the wife saying, okay, enough is enough, or the kids saying enough is enough? Like, how do we educate people, and how do we give people the tools to pick up on that pattern in themselves?
Yeah. So it's hard for people to see
Mm,
themselves. For anybody, including myself. Right? Because it's painful. It's painful to see those dark shadows. That's kind of based on our Jungian, theory, but we all have dark shadows. We all have parts of ourselves that we rather not have, right?
mhm.
Yeah. And that could be maybe jealousy or anger, or a part of us that's stubborn, or inflexible and rigid.
Yeah.
There's all different parts of us. And I know for myself, when I was younger, I definitely used anger as a means by which to feel strength and feel control. And it's a false sense of control and it's a false sense of strength.
Yeah.
So over the years, because I've been doing a lot of inner work, obviously, right? I've softened up. And I remember it was so interesting, like months and months ago, I was talking to somebody and, I think it was a colleague, and they said to me afterwards, they're like, there's something different about you. Like I just sense like this lightness and softness to you. And I was so thrilled because that is exactly what I'm trying to cultivate in my life is this kind of softness. And she was able to see it. And it felt so good to hear that because that's so important to me. Like, I want to be soft. I want to be warm. I want to be caring. I want to be connected. I want to be kind. That's compassionate. Like, that's who I am. That is my genuine, authentic self, not angry, not kind of aggressive. That is not who I am. So when let's say my attachment, I would say challenges come up which lead me to be more like kind of anxiously attached, that part of me comes out. It rears its head. And I know, right, A, that I have to work and heal that part of me. And B, that I cannot have people in my life that evoke that, that poke the bear. And I'm not saying, listen, everybody's going to evoke something. I'm not saying that I disconnect from relationships because I have people in my life, obviously my family members, like close friends and etc., that do poke it at times, which leads to further healing. But I can have somebody in my life that constantly, because of their own, selective wounds, evoke that and poke the bear and poke the bear and poke the bear, because that doesn't allow me to be my best self. And I recognize that. So those kind of people I have to set boundaries with. I have to maybe, distance from. I have to choose whether it's a healthy relationship for me, and that's where we learn these kind of skills. Because if you know yourself well enough, you know what relationships are healthy for you and where you need to set boundaries and where you need to assert your needs. With this particular, male that I was just talking about, he realizes that his behavior is reactive from a subconscious, unconscious place, not from a present moment adult self. That need to please, that need to always be seen in a certain way, that need, right? Then he gets remote from his values. And then he's acting from that place of neediness and that place of lack of sovereignty. And that's not healthy. So, again, what's the residual effects of that? It's like recalibrating these relationships in his family. Well, guess what? Not everybody's on board. Not everybody's willing or able or committed to being in that space. Some people's defenses are really high, and some people are very guarded, and some people have ego defenses, which don't allow for that. And they're in their space, and he's in his space, right? And how do you manage that and maneuver around that? Like, there's just a lot of kind of stuff that comes out. I just actually wrote an article because I'm a Psychology Today blogger. I wrote an article this past week because I have a lot of, patients that I work with, obviously, who are cultivated or are getting, kind of on the journey of cultivation and enlightenment. And they really are having a challenging time in their dating life. And I felt like, no, like you need to understand why that's the case. So I just wrote this piece and, sent it out to people, obviously, who could benefit from it.
That's curious to me because I do think, I think the more inner work you do, well, this has been my personal experience, but you tell me what you've seen. The more inner work you do on yourself, I feel like it lets me show up at the table more compassionately, more open, more willing to see past people's flaws, even if you understand them.
Perspective.
I just think it gives, yeah. And that everybody gets where they get because of stuff. And many times it's not their own stuff. And like, you have to have some compassion for that. So I don't know. I would think it's easier.
That's one
Okay,
side
what's
of
the
it.
other side?
That's one side of it. Yeah. So I talk about that. I talk about what like are the kind of benefits, right? Advantages and disadvantages of doing your inner work. And I'm not saying that the disadvantages, so to speak, right, doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing your inner work. It just means that you have to be aware of it and you have to take that into consideration when you're approaching relationships. That's all. So the other flip side of it is yes, you definitely have more perspective taking and your selection process by far is so much healthier, right? So that's really important because in the long run, if you select better, then there's again more feasibility to get into a healthy relationship that's going to be long and a sustaining relationship. Those things are wonderful. But the selection process becomes very challenging because you're narrowing your selection process because you are more aware, you're more reflective. You get what your attachment styles are. You get what your love languages are. You get what is healthy to entertain in your life or not. You get like all of those things, and that makes the selection process very, very narrow.
Yeah,
It
you're
does
filtering.
just you filtering, but in a healthy way, right?
Yeah.
So that's one. And then the second thing too is there's more hypervigilance, right? Because you may then, in some ways become over worrying or hypervigilant about all these red flags, and become a little bit not obsessive, but like overthink or overanalyze, really being present in the relationships that those things happen too. And again, is it that the person needs to be exactly in the same space as you are in terms of their inner work?
Definitely not.
Not necessarily, because we're not always in the same space. However, the most integral, important piece of that is there a willingness? In other words, if you have an interaction with somebody, are they willing to hear
Yeah.
you? Are they willing to be non-defensive and non-judgmental? Are they willing to take what you're saying into consideration? They willing to attune to your kind of feelings and needs? Are they willing, right, to bend and be flexible in their interactions with you and in their actions toward you? Those things, no, those things cannot be compromised. But if somebody's wounded and hasn't done their inner work, that's going to come really hard for them and challenging, and they may not be able
Yeah,
to meet
that's
your
fair.
needs because
Yeah.
of those reasons. And that's important. That's really important. So, yes, like for example, I'm a therapist, right? And I do a lot of inner work, and this is my profession. So I have to really bend myself in that way because I, by nature, have very, very high expectations emotionally for people that I interact with, both when it comes to friends, family, etc., I do. And I have to watch myself because that could be very judgmental. It could be very alienating. It could be very off-putting, and I can't help it. That's just who I am. And I'm also an empath by nature. So, like, I don't get, like, huh? Why would you not want to act that way? I would act that way. I would be like kind of aware of those things. I would be like thinking about those things, because I'm also a detail-oriented person. I don't forget stuff. I remember when people tell me things, I follow up with them.
100%. Yeah.
Not everybody does that. And then I feel wounded. Like they don't care about me and they're not considerate of my feelings. And if they knew me, they would know to follow up and maybe they don't care. Again, your mind just kind of goes into all these places. And I have to stop and I have to say to myself, is that about you or is that about them?
It's about you.
Yeah.
It's about you.
And I have to like really, really, and I have to sit with, gosh, that hurts. And gosh, that really reminds me of when I was like 8 and da 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 da, right? And my core wound is rejection and abandonment. And it always goes back there because I am looking for stimulus from the environment, right? Reminding me how abandoned and rejected I am so I could protect myself because my brain is always going to want to protect me from those core
Yeah.
wounds. Yeah. And I have to constantly be on top of that. It's funny. I have this situation that's happening with me right now where basically I had the opportunity to get together with somebody and I really want to see them because I haven't seen them in a while and I feel very connected to them and I like to me connection is always about being with somebody and spending time with them and like all of that. And they went on a trip and they have a flight and whatever, and then they're telling but so they said that they're tired, that they can't get together, whatever. And in my mind, what's going on in my mind, right?
Your mind is
I'm
saying,
like,
I'm not good enough. You can't make time for me. I'm not a priority. This isn't important enough.
right,
Blah, blah, all those things.
right. Oh, and if it were me, I don't care how tired I would be, because that's the truth. I would drive 3 hours and I would be with this person because I want to show them how important they are to me. And I would go out of my way and I would be tired. And you know what? It doesn't even matter if I'm tired because as long as I'm with the person, even just kind of being with them or sharing a meal with them, like I don't care if I am completely alert, etc. So I am imposing kind of my shoulds on the
100%. Yeah.
person. And on top of that, right, there's this sense of, right, they should be doing this. And if it were me, I would be doing this. And what's wrong with them that they're not doing this? And then I'm like confused. Should I expect this from them? Or should I not expect this from them? Should I say something to them about it? Should I not? Like it's like, blah, 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 like it's like this mountain. And I have to sit with the feelings and say, this is what's kind of coming up for me. This is how it feels. When I'm in situations when I feel like people are not stepping it up, it scares me because I'm always worried I'm going to give 70, they're going to give 30 because that's the propensity of my relationships, because that's kind of the person I am, right? Because I give my full heart, full speed ahead, etc. Right? And does this relationship deserve that at this point? Does the relationship, should I have those kind of levels of expectation for this relationship? Just again, there's so many things, but it's such a life learning lesson.
Yeah.
And it's such a place of healing because it taps directly into my rejection and abandonment.
Mhm.
Like, so what does that tell me? That I still need
Yeah.
healing.
Yeah.
I still need to heal this part of
But
me.
self
Yeah.
awareness, I just was going to say that self awareness is, I always say self awareness is the key to any kind of change, right? Is being able to identify, even if you're not ready to change it, getting into that
Yeah.
position of noticing it and being aware of your own, whatever you want to
Yes.
call it, your own mess, your own
Yes.
shit,
Yes.
whatever, your own patterns. I mean, once you know, you can act differently on them or at least start thinking about them differently. So that's key. Self awareness is key. And then the other thing, all of what you were saying just reminded me so much of many, 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 many years ago, my first management position. And one of the very first lessons I learned was you can't expect your staff to show up the way you show up. They're not you. And that's the same
Yeah.
as in these relationships. You can't put
Hmm.
your values and your, propensity to come at 70% of it all the time. Other people maybe can only give 50 and that's just who they are. Like we're all wired differently. So
Yeah.
knowing that and kind of keeping that in check, such a great lesson early on for people because it's not
Yeah.
just personal relationships, it's business relationships. So I guess that's the point I'm making there too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's more even than it's kind of facing yourself.
Mm.
It's like a mirror. Like relationships are a mirror,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, you know, like there is a part of me, like just the example that I gave, there's a part of me that I know is a projection because the projection is in my mind, I'm evaluating that kind of action as being self-driven or selfish or self-focused,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know, right, because I was raised with parents who were very self-focused, that it scares me. And and I always feel like there's not going to be enough room for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I have to like really, really, think about that. Like, isn't it wonderful that somebody could say to you, I'm tired and I need some time and I want to end even more than that, because this is the most important piece. When I'm with you, I want to be on my game.
Mm.
I want to be fully present with you.
Yes.
And you're so important to me and your needs are so important to me that I want to be fully, fully engaged and present with you.
Yes.
How come that doesn't occur to me when they say that?
Well, I think that's one of the exercises we can teach people is what
Yes.
other perspective could you have?
Yeah.
Right? That's
Yes.
a great question I've learned. What other perspective can you have? Because everything can be looked at through a different lens and kind of reset
Yes.
your thinking. And that spiral
Exactly.
that we can get into, right?
Yeah.
You can shift yourself right out of it if you take a different perspective.
1000%. And again, that's the question I always ask myself. That's a skill and tool that I teach.
Love that.
How else can I see this?
Yes. Yes.
Right? Because it kind of gets you right there. And then also, is this action that I'm going to take, is it leaning into my confidence or outside of my confidence?
Oh, that's a good one. Wait, let's talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about that in practice.
Sure.
Break that down because leaning into your confidence in this scenario would look like what, and leaning out would look like what?
Okay, good question.
Use it as an example.
I love that question. So I'm all about values.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's all about acting on behalf of your values. That allows you to be your best self and live the life you want.
Yep.
Okay. My values of relationships or friendships or whatever you want to call it is predicated on kindness, consideration, respect,
Yep.
and compassion. Those are the precepts of how I see and define my friendships and relationships.
Rules of
Okay.
engagement. Got it.
Yeah. So if I were to approach him and I were to say, I can't believe like that you decided not to see me, what's wrong with you? Like, if it were me, I would see you maybe you don't care as much as I care about and I were to make it a fatal flaw about him, which again, I've done in my past. Okay. Because I know the things to say that get people to really, really
Of course.
reconsider. Yes, because of my training and everything else. And I also, that's what I did when I was younger. That's what I did. I know what I did
Yeah.
to strengthen, quote unquote, myself.
Yeah.
Okay. And I always have to be the more evolved one and the more emotionally in tune one, because that's like my superpower. And that makes me feel more powerful. Okay. Guess what? As an adult, don't want to be that way anymore. I don't want people to be stranglehold into a relationship with me. I don't want them to feel that they need me or they're dependent on me emotionally.
Right.
No, that's not healthy.
Right.
That's my past life. Okay. So that would be, again, because of the woundedness and, that gets evoked, there is a propensity to behave in that way. Okay. Because that keeps him, right, less emotionally kind of attuned and feeling more insecure. And that worked for me in the past. Not going there, not doing that. Been there, done that. Right. And what ends up happening is they end up feeling that they're not good enough for me. That's the problem. And they end up feeling, I love you so much, but you deserve better than me. That's not healthy or helpful. No. Like, and I don't want to ever make anyone feel that way.
Hmm.
And that's not who I am as an authentic human. Like, I only want to bolster people and make them feel their best self. So the difference is A, sitting with my feelings, sitting with my hurt, and not doing anything because I need to process this and get some sense about it. Okay. And number one, like I said, the fact that, and they said this to me, by the way, they said to me, because again, I had to really think about it, because of course, that is the thing I would forget about and it would be over my head. But they did say to me, I'm going to be useless if I come see you. They did say that. Okay. I had to really remember that because that like didn't resonate and didn't like kind of right. And then I have to think about like, okay, like if I do want to say something because I want to make it a point of like letting them know, like, I don't care what condition you're in. I want to see you because I want to connect with you. And our relationship is so important to me that I'm willing to connect to you no matter what, you know? And it's okay if you're not up for that, but I just want to let you know how important you are to me because that's who I am as a kind, compassionate, warm human. And I tell people how important they are to me because that is how I connect to people and they appreciate it. So then I may say to him, listen, I know, you were away and you had a flight and you were exhausted. But I just want to let you know the reason why I suggested us getting together is just because I like to be with you in any size, form, and shape. Because just by being with you and spending time with you makes me really happy and connected. So in the future, like, just to consider that, like, if you're willing to extend yourself a little bit, and if you don't, that's okay too. I'm just letting you know that you mean a lot to me, period.
Period, and not expect anything else. I'm sitting here noodling in my head how that would be received in real life.
And by the way, so this is the most important part of what I'm saying, because this is what I teach. It is not about the outcome. It's not about the outcome at all. It's about the process. In other words, myself, took the time to process my feelings, to kind of understand my hurt. And most importantly, I acted in a valued way that leaned into my value of friendship and
Hmm.
relationships. And I could walk away from that no matter what he says. It doesn't really matter. It's not predicated on his response to me. It's predicated on me putting myself out there in a way that I'm proud of. And when I say leaning into your confidence, that is leaning into your confidence. That is saying, Michelle, yay, you. You did something so different this time than you did in the past. And you are lighter and you are kinder and you are warmer. And if anybody comes over to you and says you're not a kind, warm person, I will not even consider it because I know better. And in the past, I didn't consider myself. I actually thought I was a mean person because of my sometimes, again, mean spirited thoughts, feelings, actions. I actually thought that about myself. I don't think that way about myself anymore. And even if I do an unkind act or I have an unkind thought or feeling, does not make me an unkind person. And I will never believe that again because that is not the way I behave.
That's a good distinction. That is a good distinction.
And if I do behave that way, because we're all human
Yep.
and I'm imperfect,
Yep.
and there are going to be times that I slip, that is not all of me. That is a tiny, little, tiny part of me that I am
Hmm.
working on, that I am healing, that I am constantly, constantly working on.
Yeah, it's not who you are.
I will never stop working on that till the day I die.
Yeah, I like that distinction. And I do think the other distinction of that, it's about the act of what you did
Mhm.
is important. It's important. And I get the leaning into the confidence now, because I was going to say, so you're using confidence synonymously with your values.
Yeah.
And it's a yes, sort of, but you also went on to say about feeling confident in the way you reacted and the way you handled things. So I that brought it together for me. So thank
Yes.
you for that.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. There's always work to be done, right?
Oh, it never ends. You know why it never ends? Which is makes sense, right? We're always maturing, developing. Our lives are always transforming through our every stage of
Hmm.
development. Like I'm at a point, I have 4 kids, right? My youngest is a junior in high school. Another year and a half, or not even a year and a half, I'm gonna be an empty nester.
Yeah.
That is a whole new world for me.
Hmm.
Whole new world. Like that is going to come, like a lot of thoughts and feelings and evolutions are going to come from that space,
Yeah.
and as I age, and there's always going to be changes that happen. And my values may shift. My core values probably won't, but like in terms of the behaviors that I want to exhibit based on my values may change. The way I see myself, the type of relationships I have in my life, it could even be where I'm living and, etc. Like there's so many changes that happen all the
And that's
time.
best case, right? I think best case is there are people that are tapped into that continuous
Yeah.
development. They're on a quest for being the best person they can be. And it doesn't end. It just doesn't. It's a journey that continues on until we are not here anymore. So hopefully, I think that's the best case in my opinion. But
Yeah.
I think some people get frightened by the thought of kind of being on that quest. And I just literally just said this in an episode a couple episodes ago because somebody was talking about it. And somebody else reminded me that if you don't change, you're the only thing not changing. Like you said, everything around you is changing. We're getting older. I mean, the world is changing. Our families, our relationships, our people, our jobs, everything's changing.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
how can we not?
We are constantly, right? It's an evolution. We're
Yeah.
constantly evolving. And, life and, the universe ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
So that is very true. Constantly. We can't help it. I mean, from day to day, I always say from moment to moment, from day to day, like think about in the course of a day, if you tracked how many thoughts and feelings come up for you.
A lot, right? I mean, you
So,
don't even process a lot of them.
yeah. Well, because we're not in our kind of conscious awareness, but like there's research that we have at least 6,200 thoughts a
Wow.
day.
It's a lot when you think about
Yeah.
it, right?
My goodness, right? And if you think about how many decisions we
Yeah.
make on a daily
Yeah.
basis, what we're going to eat for
Yeah.
lunch, and like what we're going to respond to somebody, and whether we're going to set up a meeting to meet with that person or that, and how many emotions we go through, right? We could be driving to go meet somebody and be so excited about it, but then get stopped by a police officer and get a ticket,
100%.
or whatever.
Yes.
These things happen all the
All
time.
day long.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is crazy when you start breaking it down and think about
Yes.
how much we process and how much change and how many
Yeah.
emotions. It's just constant.
Exactly.
Constant.
Exactly.
Wow. Good stuff. Deep stuff.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure we have time to talk about Through My Eyes, because
Yeah.
when I read about it, I thought this sounds like such a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
And I just want to hear more about it. Like, what are you
Thank you.
doing?
So it's my nonprofit. It's called Through My Eyes, THRU. It offers free clinically guided videotaping for chronically medically ill individuals who want to leave a video legacy for their children and loved ones. Um, I've done over 300 videotapes and it is a free service. I'm looking actually right now to restructure it. And the problem and the challenge I've come up against is really wanting to partner.
Hmm.
It was more local, and I really want to have it be more national across the country because I'm able to reach people all over the country and offer this service that is so needed. I did a videotape on this woman who lives in like the remote part of rural America and had 7 children. She subsequently passed, unfortunately, and had cancer. But she didn't even have access to internet. She had to do the videotaping from her doctor's office.
Oof.
Yeah. So these are the kind of people I want to reach. I want to reach
Yeah.
everybody who wants access to this service. And I really need, funding and support. So I am trying so hard because I know everybody could relate to this, unfortunately. I really want to partner up. I don't care if it's a hospice, a hospital, an individual who wants to just do good work. I have no ego in this whatsoever. Like I literally see the help and the support that people get from having this. Families come over to me and they're so thankful. They're like, we would never have done this if we didn't know about you, and this was so therapeutic, and we're so thankful that we have this piece, that we could hear the person's voice and we could understand their life lessons and their legacy through this video. So I know the impact it makes. I
Mm.
know it does. And I want to share it with the world. I want to really help people.
Yeah, I love that. I think for me, when I started thinking about it, I was thinking it must be great because it's, the guided, having somebody that's a professional help you go through it, because it does feel a little bit like you would be torn, like, oh, this is going to be so sad. And do I really want to do this? But really, it could be your last chance to leave those messages or those words of wisdom or whatever it is.
Yes.
I feel like it would be such a great service to be able to offer.
It is a great service.
Mm,
It is. It really is. I can't say that enough. I see how people react to it, and there's such gratitude.
yeah.
So I'm so thrilled to offer it, to others. The other thing that I did is I customize it. So I came up with over 200 questions, and people are able to kind of sift through the questions prior, and think about what they want to share, what they don't want to share. I've had people come back to me and say, I don't want to go there. And I'm like, that's okay.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own needs. So it's so wonderful that it could also accommodate each person based on where they're at too,
Yeah.
what their
Yeah.
needs are. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Well, I hope, my fingers are crossed, that you come across some big benefactor who can give you all the money to go forward with it.
And by the way, just saying, like, as far as nonprofits go, it's really not a lot of money. I mean that. Like, I know there's people out there who want to do good in the world, who have the means and who could like really, really have good networks. And because it's really
Yeah.
marketing, it's really marketing. And I have a marketing plan. I have a business plan. I have a short video. So I could send that out to anybody who's interested. It's really somebody who I'm very passionate about it. It needs to be somebody who's equally as passionate. And I have yet to find other people. My passion runneth over, as they say.
It doesn't surprise me now that I've spent a little bit of
Yeah.
time with you.
Thank
All
you.
right. I have a question to wrap up that I love to ask people. What's the best piece of advice you ever got?
Oh gosh, I have never been asked that question.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, and I love that question. So thank you so much for being so thoughtful. You know, I'll tell you because something popped up in my mind when you said that. I did a psychotherapy group for psychotherapists,
Okay.
which was mind blowing and really like life changing for me. But the person who ran the group, the leader, he was like a very premier like therapist, who wrote tons and tons of books, and he was like amazing. He unfortunately subsequently died from like prostate cancer. However, he was an amazing person. He once said to me something that really sticks with me forever. He said, "What does it mean to be good enough?"
Mm,
And he gave me the example of his parents, they were elderly. And, he had a family and like small children, and he would make it a point once a week to go out of his way after work and, drive. It was long distance to visit his parents, and he would stay there as long as he could, to visit with them. And every single time he would leave, his mother would totally guilt him and say, like, you weren't here for long enough, and like you don't spend enough time with us. And he was tortured. He was tortured because he never felt like he was good enough. And he always left feeling resentful that he took this time away from his small kids and his family to do this, and she never appreciated him.
yeah.
And then he decided he was going to be good enough, and he got to decide what that meant.
Mm,
And once he integrated that into his life and he really kind of took that into consideration, he was always so happy to visit them. And no matter what she said, he felt proud to be the kind of son that makes the commitment and is loyal to his parents in the way that he is to do and visit them the way he does.
Yeah.
And that was huge for me because I too have some challenging relationships, family relationships. And that is something I constantly say to myself, like, what does it mean to be a good enough sister? What does it mean to be a good enough daughter? What does it mean to be a good enough parent? What does it, mean to be a good enough friend? And that doesn't, like some people may say, well, then you're kind of settling on mediocrity. It isn't. It actually isn't, because I get to define what that is,
Yeah.
and I get then to be proud of who I am. Yeah.
You get to put the boundaries on it. You get to define it.
Yeah.
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 I like that. And it also sort of indicates that you stop looking for the validation from the other people because
That's right.
you're getting it
That's
through
right.
your own definitions. And that's
That's
probably the real
yeah.
lesson underneath it all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because it's all perspective, right?
100%.
So like somebody could look at it and say, what an amazing son.
Yeah.
Like
That's what I was thinking every week.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, literally, he was going every week. Like he was so committed to them and loyal to that, and even when they got sicker, he was going more often, but it was never good enough no matter what.
And probably wouldn't have been until he moved back in and was their little boy.
Yeah, never, ever.
Such a great perspective shift. Thank you for sharing that. Where can people find you the most? Is it through your blog? Is that the ongoing work? Is that the easiest place?
Well, so I have my blog that I publish at least once a month, a new article. I have my YouTube channel. Every Thursday morning at 11 a.m., I publish a new guided meditation, which people like. I'm available on all social media outlets, Instagram, Facebook, etc. But on my website, which is my name, my full name, which is michellemaidenberg.com, which is 2 L's, and Maidenberg is Maidenberg. And I have 2 books that I wrote. I have a 3rd book out now that's out. The proposal's out. So I'm working on a 3rd book and maybe even a 4th. So very exciting, projects coming up.
Awesome. Lots going on. Well, we'll put the links out there for everybody, but it sounds like for sure the website, everybody can get connected to everything on the website, but we'll put all the links out there. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. It was so nice meeting you.
Same here. Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.